Flip to Freedom, episode number 72. Hello again, this is Sean Terry from the Flip to Freedom podcast, and we are on episode number 72. Now, if you're listening for the very first time, I'd like to welcome you and let you know that I have put this podcast together for you to show you how to go out and escape the 9-to-5. Not to show you, really, to help you go out there and escape the 9-to-5. Get out of the rat race, be done with corporate America. And you'll learn how to gain this freedom by flipping properties, wholesaling properties, okay? And wholesaling is as simple as this. It's getting a motivated seller under contract for a price, and then turn around and flipping the paper. Okay, selling the paper, selling the property for a higher price. So, an example, if you have a $100,000 house and you get it under contract for $50,000, well, you could turn around and market it to sell it to a cash buyer for, say, $60,000. Now, the cash buyer will bring in 100% of the funds, $60,000 plus closing cost, and $10,000 will go to you, and the balance will go to the seller. The seller will be happy because they're going to get their price. You're going to be happy because you make $10,000. The buyer's going to be happy because they get a $100,000 property at a below market price. Now, the great thing about this business is you can do it over and over and over and over again. And another great thing about this business is it doesn't matter the size of the deal. You can get a property under contract. We've had people that get HUD homes under contract for $2,500 for $36 and turn around and sell it for $25,000. Not a bad deal. We've got people that have got, I recently talked about in the previous episode a deal I got under contract for $17 and flipped it for $49. Well, that's a $32,000 deal. Not bad off one particular deal. You know what? That's sometimes off one deal that took me 3 weeks. That is sometimes as much as someone makes an entire year. And I'm very grateful that I was actually found and tripped across this method, but it's been phenomenal. But anyways, this whole podcast is about teaching you or working with you to show you exactly how you can go out there and find these properties, negotiate the deals, get them under contract, find the buyers, flip the properties, and you can turn around and get cash coming in. Now, if you make $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year, the goal is to get $50,000 to $100,000 a year of cash in the bank by flipping properties in your spare time around your job. So then you have the option to quit your job if you'd like. Now, in this particular episode, we are going to talk about how to wholesale commercial properties. Now, I like to look at it like this, is that with real estate, you can do small deals, right? And then what's going to happen is when you're marketing, you're going to run across big deals like 20-unit apartment complexes, commercial plazas. You're gonna come across 50-unit apartment complexes, and instead of turning those deals away, you can in turn understand how to evaluate them correctly, how to get them under contract, and how to sell them for not $15,000, $20,000, or $5,000, but I'm talking a six-figure paycheck flipping these particular properties. Now, I'm not an expert. I flipped commercial properties before, in the past, but I am not the leading expert when it comes to flipping wholesaling actually commercial properties. So what I did is I went out and I searched for the leading expert that goes out there and is willing to take his time to teach people how to go out and wholesale commercial properties from start to finish. And I found an unbelievable gentleman. I basically had to twist his arm to be able to come on and share in detail of exactly how to flip or wholesale commercial properties. Now, the gentleman is phenomenal. He is an attorney, and his name is Bob Diamond. Now, let me give you an idea of the caliber of this gentleman I have for you on the special interview. Bob is currently a practicing attorney right now. He's a real estate developer. He's done well over $100 million in real estate transaction. He has written books on foreclosure investing. He's also appeared on Fox, NBC, and CNBC as a leading expert when it comes to foreclosure investing and commercial real estate. He graduated from Villanova University in finance and went to Temple Law School and is currently flipping these type of properties all across the entire country and working with students, teaching people exactly how to go out and do it. But he's also worked for the Cozen O'Connor law firm, which is one of the 100 largest law firms in the entire country. So he knows what's great about Bob is that he has a legal background along with knowing the real estate, and then puts those two together. And what he focuses on especially is commercial properties, how to negotiate them, how to get them under contract. So I recorded this interview earlier today, and the information that I drag out of him is awesome. It's so good. Literally, what we do is we take an example property and we walk you through how to find the buyers, how to find the sellers, how to negotiate with the seller, understanding a valuation on a property, and how to negotiate that point, how to get the property under contract, what forms you need to use to get the property under contract, how to negotiate the right time frames with the due diligence, how to then market it to the buyer, and how to structure the transaction with your buyer so you can go out and then collect your check. Now, an example we talk about inside here was a 20-unit apartment complex where literally he tells you exactly a quick negotiation tip that can turn a very, very a simple property into a $52,800 profit. I was like, wow, that is super cool of how literally negotiating this one thing will make such a big difference. So I think this interview is one of the best interviews I have done. The information he gives is phenomenal, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So enough of my jibber jabber. Let's go into the interview right now with the attorney, the commercial maven, Bob Diamond. All right, I have the commercial wholesale maven on the line with me today, and he's extremely busy, but I have hunted him down to have him share a unique concept and when it comes to wholesaling commercial properties. And the gentleman by the name of Bob Diamond is on the line with me. Bob, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sean.
I can tell you, I am super excited about this call because when it comes to commercial wholesaling, it's like the next step up. You do single family houses or maybe 1 to 4 units, and you get these $15,000 shacks and turn around and sell them for $30,000 and stuff like that. But when we do marketing, there's lead generation that comes in, and then there are deals that come about that are commercial. And I recently just flipped a 16-unit apartment complex using the commercial and doing the due diligence and stuff like that. But I can tell you, I am not an expert when it comes into flipping commercial properties. I had to kind of navigate my way through it. So I had so many questions from people all across the country that were like, how do you do commercial? What happens if I get a apartment complex or a strip center? How do I make money? How can I be comfortable going through the process? So I searched far and wide and asked for recommendations of who is the best in the business when it comes to commercial wholesale, and that's why we are here today to talk about how to flip big deals, commercial wholesaling. So Bob, tell us, how did you get into flipping wholesale commercial properties?
Well, I've been investing for quite a while in commercial, meaning
right.
I buy places and fix them. Like where I'm sitting right now is in my office, which is my office building, where there's 21 offices plus a restaurant, and I occupy a couple of the offices here and rent out the rest.
Right.
So I've been doing commercial for a while, and I, of course, stepped up. I started out with a a little 3-bedroom single-family house, about 1,100 square feet, that I fixed up by myself. Of course, that was 20 years ago, so it was a while ago. But I started out there, and I worked my way up. And truthfully, I'd gotten to the point where I was competent to do like a triplex or a quadplex, things that qualified for standard Fannie Mae type financing. And then I switched law practices. I'm a real estate lawyer by trade. And I went to a law firm, a big national firm called Cozen O'Connor that does commercial real estate transactions.
Right.
And I really learned the commercial real estate from doing it, obviously being taught by the partners there at the firm and working with clients that were just killing it in commercial. People doing office parks for $80 million and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, anything from that to buying a car dealership. So I learned the ins and outs of commercial, anything from multifamily that are 50 or 100 units or more, to office buildings, to strip centers. I learned how to figure out what the zoning is, how to read a survey and understand what it means and why you would even get one in connection with a commercial transaction. And so I learned the business that way. And then when I left the big firm, I was back out on my own doing what I truly love, which is the real estate developing and investing. I took that information and I moved into commercial. And I moved into commercial for really the obvious reason. It's no big mystery. There are more zeros in the end of a commercial deal, so there's more money to be made.
Right.
Just like you said with your 16 unit, you made, $45,000 wholesaling a 16 unit. And that's, you can't really do that with a house. I mean, I suppose someone has made $45,000 wholesaling a house once, but that's really not, wholesaling houses is a $5,000 or $10,000 exercise.
Right.
It's not a $45,000 exercise. So I was attracted because it's really not much more work, if any, to wholesale a commercial as it is a house. And there are more zeros. Plus, the other thing I think a lot of people don't realize, even people who are in real estate right now, is that certain sectors of commercial are really red hot right now. And the number one sector, and I think everybody would be familiar with this certainly on this call, is multifamily residential.
Right.
Apartment buildings. Anything that's over 5 units. And we're typically talking about anything from a 16 unit like you did to a couple hundred units.
Right.
And that's hot for obvious reasons. I mean, we have people today that can't qualify for mortgages, so they rent. We have an echo boomer population, which are kids that are turning in their 20s. They're renters. We have people who just don't want to buy right now because they're worried about buying a house. They think maybe their job's not 100% secure or that they wouldn't qualify for a mortgage. So all those things kind of come together and have increased the renter population. And at the same time, there's been very little activity on constructing multifamilies. You don't see apartment buildings being built right now.
Right.
So, simple economics. Supply is steady, demand goes up, and price goes up. So investors are really hot to get their hands on multifamily, and I found that I could locate those multifamily deals, analyze them, and turn them over to investors who are sitting there anxiously waiting with cash to buy them.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing that might surprise people. I know that on your call, I mean, your folks are very astute about wholesaling residential.
Right.
But they may not follow, for example, the stock market or the bond market. And the stock and bond market have been very dicey over the past, actually, decade. They have very little return, very high risk, relatively speaking, and very volatile. And there's just no return. So what do you do? Put your money in a CD at 0.5 of 1%? So there people with money, a lot of which are institutions who have to invest their money, like insurance companies and pension funds and things like that, are desperate to find some return because their livelihood depends on them getting a return. Like when you give your money to State Farm Insurance for your insurance premium,
right,
they have to set aside a lot of it for claims. They need to know, like when a big storm comes along, that there's money to pay everybody. So that money sits in an account and it's invested to get a return so that the money grows so that when there's a claim, it's available to pay.
Right.
And those big investors are really anxious for deals right now. And there are also people who make money.
Yeah, even the big investors like a State Farm, but even the small mom and pop guys that have maybe a Roth IRA, a self-directed Roth IRA, a 401k or something like that, where they want to, or even just cash, where they want to invest in real estate and they want to step up because they don't want to have the single-family houses. They want to have a multi-unit of 10 unit, 10, 20, 50 units or whatever for that cash flow to be able to have a management company come in and manage it. All right, so Bob, what I want to do is I want you to take me through a transaction from start to finish, okay?
Sure.
And assuming that I am absolutely brand new, I don't know anything about commercial, and like you're talking to me like I'm a 10-year-old. So I don't.
You got it.
I don't. I don't understand. So from a brand new person's perspective, like me, and I'm brand new, I don't know anything about commercial, and I say, okay, I want to be able to break into the commercial wholesaling business. Now, one thing to make note for people listening, what's great about Bob's technique is that you don't have to have any cash or credit to do this. You can flip properties, wholesale properties, using no cash and credit, but the difference is with commercial, it's just a bigger project. And I always tell people, whether it be a $15,000 house, or do a Donald Trump when it talks about a $20 or $50 million deal, it's still real estate. It's still real estate. You're still in the real estate, niche. But the bottom line is just different buildings, different numbers, different due diligence, different things you do. But there's no reason why a person that flips a $15,000 house, can't do a $2 million or $3 million property. It's just having that knowledge. So what I want to do is kind of tear back and really dissect on how that is particularly done. So from a new person's perspective, what would be the first thing, if I want to get into this, what would be the first thing that you would recommend that someone do to basically start their business?
I would say step one would be to locate some buyers. The best thing, 3 buyers or 4 buyers. So you want people who are buying a certain kind of asset. What I mean by that is, for example, 3 or 4 multifamily buyers. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to chase around strip shopping centers, 3 or 4 buyers of strip shopping centers. You want a couple of buyers so that, first of all, they'll compete with one another so you'll get more money.
Right.
And secondly, at any given time, some will be in the market looking to buy and others will be processing deals they've bought, so they're not looking to buy. So we recommend find the buyer first. Right.
So you find the buyer, then you know exactly what you can tee up for them. So in when it comes to wholesaling houses, I always tell people to go down to the county courthouse and find buyers that are bidding on properties there. Or obviously you look in a particular neighborhood and you can find any closed transactions that are done cash, and you can send mailers to those particular buyers. So in the commercial real estate sector, how would you find those buyers?
I would look for two types. Number one is people already own that kind of property. Like, for example, let's just take multifamily, because I think it's something everybody on this call is going to be somewhat familiar with, and it's easy to talk about. Let's say that you're going to try to source anything from a 10 to a 50-unit apartment building. Inside, that's your target.
Okay.
I would contact owners of those kinds of apartment buildings in the geographic area that you're targeting.
Okay, so I'm in Maricopa County, Arizona, and let's say I'm just going to target Phoenix, right? And I want to find multifamily. Now, where would I look? What type of search would I do?
You go down to the courthouse, go to the county land records, which will be that's going to be your county clerk in Maricopa County.
Right.
You go to the county clerk's office where they keep the real estate records, meaning where a deed of trust or a mortgage would be recorded, where you look up a deed, and there you would look up owners of existing multifamily properties. Now, you may ask how you would do that, and the way you would do that is every county in America, and there are about 3,300 of them, has what's called a land use code. And land use codes they divide up properties by the way that they're used. So, example, apartments would typically have a land use code that begins with A. So it might be A1, A2, A3, A4, A5.
Right.
And the difference between the categories would be the size of the property. Like A1 might be 1 to 4 unit apartment building. A2 might be 4 to 10 units. A3 may be 10 to 25 units. The counties can set the exact criteria, but they'll have the breakdown list for you. And what you do is look for owners of those kinds of properties.
Now, can't this be done online, like through either through MLS or through like the county assessor's website or documents? So you could do a search through the county assessors in a particular area, or maybe go on like in Maricopa County, they have what's called a GIS maps, and you actually can pull up a map and you can click on a particular parcel, and it will tell you all the details, the owner of record of the parcel, and when they bought it, and how much they bought it for, and stuff like that. So. So it could be done online, or you could, if it's not online, if you can't find online, you could go down to the county. Is that correct?
Yes, and the counties can also print you off a report.
Oh, they can?
Each county has a data processing office of the people that manage the computer systems, and they have the capability of printing off a report for you and giving it to you on a disk, which you typically download into Microsoft Excel. And they can give you a list. Like if you said, give me all of the people that own a property that has a land use designation beginning with A. They could do that, and they will give you typically get a report. The report will be spec'd at how you wanted it, but what you'd want is a report that says the land use code, the owner's name and address, and any other contact information. Plus, it would typically ask them for a report saying when they bought the property, how much they paid for it. Because when you know those things, that's going to give you two things. That's going to give you a list, first of all, of people who are prospective buyers, but it's also going to give you your other side, people who are prospective sellers also.
Right.
Because, there are
are you
already,
looking?
Some will want to sell and want someone to buy.
Yeah, which is, and it's funny because I never knew that the counties could actually provide that data. So that's good to know. When you're looking for this particular data, are you looking for everything maybe that's within the certain designation, or are you looking for something that has recently closed in the past, say 120 days, or in the past year or 2 years? What are you looking for?
Well, there are two different sides to it. If you're looking for buyers, then I would look for people who are buying recently. So I would go back a year and just see how that works for you. I mean, obviously, you can expand your search criteria if you don't have enough buyers, but I look to start with people who bought over the past year, because those are people who are buying. They're indicating they have money today, because the economy's been in rough shape for 5 years now. So they're buying today, and they're likely candidates to still want to buy more. And then on the flip side, if you're looking for sellers, you want people who've owned for a while. I would say people who've owned at least 5 years, and the longer the better, but at least 5 years, because many people over a 5-year time period will have a different set of needs in their life. They may be moving out of Arizona into a different state. They might be tired of landlording. They might just be changing their portfolio around. They may think, well, I'm out of multifamily, I'm going to move into office buildings. Who knows what they're doing? But your candidates are sort of people who've owned for a longer amount of time. So that list will actually give you both your buyers and your sellers. Right.
That's perfect. And so now you got this list, you got this disk with this Excel spreadsheet. Now what?
Okay, so then you send out some letters.
Okay.
So you're going to send out a letter to the people that will be your prospective buyers. I would send a letter to them that says, I'm Sean Terry, and I'm in the business of real estate investing, and I'm constantly sourcing properties. And often I find properties that are excess to my needs, or just that I'm already tied up with one deal and I can't do too many at one time. So if you would like to have me let you know about it when I find a property that you might be interested in, and I can wholesale it to you, then please contact me and we'll talk, and I'll get your buying criteria. All you want to do is get them to call you.
Right. Okay.
And when they call, you're going to talk to them about, what are you looking for? Like, Sean, if you're the person calling me, I'd say, well, Sean, tell me about what kind of properties you're looking for. What areas of the city or county are you looking in? Do you want A, B, or C class properties? Do you want a minimum of 10 units? Do you want a maximum of 50 units? Just getting their criteria.
Yeah, and typically buyers, what I found, especially if they're going to pick up the phone and call, they're going to know exactly what they're looking for. So it's something that where they will know the size of the units, they'll know what type of area, they'll know what type of, if it needs any rehab or if they want something turnkey, and also they'll know what type of financing. If they just want to come in and pay cash for it, they'll know their deal size. So when you're dealing with, and it's very similar to when you're actually doing house houses because in your flipping houses, because a buyer will know, whether are they looking for buy and hold, are they looking for fix and flip, and they, how much work can they handle, what area are they looking in. So when you're talking to these buyers, a lot of them will know specifically what they want. Okay, so now let's see, you have, you send out, say, 500 letters to your Prospective. They call in. Out of 500, what would a typical response rate be that have you seen to a typical mailing?
I tell most people, although most of our efforts do a little better than this, but I tell most investors, just as a baseline, when you're doing direct mail, to think that you're going to get a response rate of 1%.
Okay.
Meaning that out of 500 letters, you probably get 5 serious people to call you.
Okay, which is it's really, you don't need a million, right? You don't need 50 people to call you. You need basically a handful of really people that are serious that you can get their criteria. Okay. Exactly. All right. So let's say now you've got these 5 people that have called, and how would you take that? Would you put them on an email list? Would you go meet with them for lunch? How would you take that relationship to the next level? So you've talked to them on the phone, you've interviewed them, you've got their criteria. Would you take that to a next level, or now would you take that information and start targeting the other list now that you pulled from the county that are all the commercial properties or multifamily properties on that particular list? What would be like the next step?
To me, the next best step would be to immediately start marketing for properties. Once you know the criteria you're looking for, because it also makes it easier for you to make the letter going outbound. If you, like, for example, can you imagine yourself writing a letter that would say, I'm buying properties for myself, and I work with some other buyers, and we're specifically looking for properties like yours. We're looking for things that are, 25 to 50 units, and, we would be interested in talking to you about your property, so please give me a call. Because it makes you very confident and self-assured, because I think one of the challenges anybody has as a wholesaler or sort of representing anybody else is if you don't really have a buyer standing behind you, it's hard to really be that confident and to come across as that confident.
But we're going to close on this thing in 30 days. I don't know how we're going to do it because I don't have any money, but but we're going to close. So it is. Right. Yeah, I understand.
But if you've got your serious buyers, then you're just gunning to get anybody to call you to sell you their property, because you know that you've got standing behind you. You've got the guys with pockets full of cash.
Now, how do you pre-qualify these buyers? I mean, because there's lots of tire kickers, and how would you? Let's say you got these 5 or 7 or whatever they're called. Is there a pre-qualification process, or it would just be you already know that they own properties, right? Because they came off that particular list, right? Which that is probably one of the best pre-qualifications because they already own real estate and they've recently purchased real estate. So I guess you don't really have to pre-qualify them beyond that. I would think.
Yeah, right? They've already performed. I mean, it's almost your due diligence. And your question is a great question, because normally if you don't know that they've performed, you have to be suspect of them. But if you know these are already property owners, then they're pretty good bets.
Yeah, they're a really good bet. Okay, so so now you send out this campaign, and is there a way now in this list? I'm sure there's a way to basically sort it for the specific properties these people are looking for in that criteria, right? You'd look for the unit size, the deal size, and stuff like that, correct?
Yes. I mean, you're going to know from the list you get from the county, you're going to know the amount that they paid, so you'll know, and from talking to them, you're going to know what from the buyer side, you're going to know what price properties they're buying.
Right.
And from the seller side, you can tell what the property size is just by the land use code.
Yep.
You're not going to know whether it's 17 units or 25, but that's not really that material. You're going to know basically what size it is. You're going to know what the seller paid for it. You're going to know when they bought it. And you have enough to make a close match. And this is another reason why you want to have multiple buyers. Ideally, you don't want to just have one. And can you work with one? Sure. As soon as you get your first buyer, you're in business.
Right.
But ideally, you want to have a few.
Yeah, okay. So now when it comes to actually, and what I like about that, the method that we've just talked about so far, is that your direct mail is highly, highly targeted, and it's coming from your very confident standpoint, meaning that you have a buyer that's looking for a property. So when that seller calls, you'll be in a position, to be able to say, hey, listen, we're looking for properties and your property fits that exact criteria. And it's cool because, now out of that list of maybe 1,000 or so, you're going to break it down to maybe 40 or 50. So you're not sending 10,000 letters out. You're spending really targeted, specific to maybe 50 to 100 people. And when they call in, you can literally have, you can have a spreadsheet, and you can actually search their information, their name, and the address when they call in. So you can have all that information right there in front of you. So let's talk about when now these buyers or these sellers call in. How do you handle that call?
Well, with the seller, we're going to talk to them. First of all, you're going to find out how motivated are they.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask questions like, ideally, how quickly, would you like to get this property sold?
Yep,
so
great question.
You ask them that. You ask them, what are you going to do with the money? And the reason we ask people that is there's always potential for seller financing, and there's potential for more creative deals like master lease options and things like that.
Yep.
Which make them very attractive wholesaling targets. And if you're someone who says, in the back of your mind, I'd like to be an owner of one of these commercial properties, if someone's willing to offer seller financing or a master lease option, that may be your foot in the door to actually own the property. Even though your cash position might not normally qualify you for a loan, a lot of sellers would like to take back financing. And I'll just go through, do you have about 30 seconds I go through some really quick math with you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's imagine that you're a seller and you have $1 million properties, because the math is easy. And you've owned it for 20 years, so you own the thing free and clear, but you're ready to retire. And you're ready to sort of take life easy.
Right.
So if you list your property for sale, and let's say you list it for sale and you get an offer for $1 million. You have two choices. You could take back financing or you could sell it for cash.
Right.
Now, for most sellers, they can say, I want the cash, right? Like, that's your knee-jerk reaction. I want the cash.
Yeah, until you get that tax bill. And then you're like,
right. So,
I wish I did an installment sale.
Step one, you get the tax bill. So there's 15%, which is the capital gains rate. So there's 15%, bam. So you're down to $850,000. And then you go to the bank and you decide you're going to invest your money because remember, you're retiring, so the money has to be safe. It can't be in a volatile investment like the stock market.
Right.
So you're going to give it to the bank, and they're going to tell you, on our CDs, right now we're paying half of 1%.
Right.
And half of 1%, just for everybody, $4,250 a year in interest.
On like what, 800,000 you said there?
850,000.
850,000.
You have $4,250 a year in interest. That's all you get.
Right.
So your income.
Now remember, he had this apartment complex that he was probably getting, $15,000 to $20,000, even $30,000 of revenue on potentially. Now down to $4,000. That's a tough one to swallow.
It was free and clear. Remember?
Yeah, I know. So he was just banking all the cash, right?
Serious cash. So then, one of the things that I teach to do is talk to them about seller financing. Because at first they're like, they want the cash. That's what everybody's first reaction.
Right.
But as you said, installment sales is another version of seller financing. If we took $1 million, and we'll just make it simple, say that they did the whole thing. And let's say you said, I'll pay you a really good rate of interest for today, and let's say that you pay them 6.5%. I just got a commercial on the other day, and it was at 6.5%, so we'll just say that that's it. At 6.5%, that's $65,000 a year in interest income.
Right.
So the question that you then say to the seller is, would you rather have $4,200 a year or $65,000 a year in profit? I don't know about you, but if I'm the seller, I'm raising my hand for the $65,000. Actually,
it's amazing that you say this, and then we'll get back to talking to the buyer, talking to the sellers there. But this 16-unit property, I initially got under contract for strictly a cash price, and the guy bought it. He bought it several years earlier. He went in and he renovated it, and then he was in a health situation where he needed to liquidate his portfolio. But he did own it free and clear. And his first, he was dead set on he had to have cash. He wanted to have cash, for for whatever reasons he wanted to have cash. So I put it out to market, and it was a marginal deal, meaning that he did spend money on a renovation, so it wasn't it wasn't seriously wholesale. It was literally 90% of 95% of retail value on the property. So it wasn't a great deal, but I put it out there just to kind of see what I could do. Well, 2 months passed, and literally got no bites on the property. I got a couple of people that called on it, but they just it wasn't at a deep discount enough for someone to write a check for it to jump through hoops, right, to get the deal done. So I went back to the guy and said, listen, and I explained exactly what we just talked about. So listen, you can do an installment sale, you don't have to pay taxes up front, and I negotiated to where he could get a 25% down payment, or no, actually it was a 20% down payment on the deal, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 20% down payment, and then what I did is I sold it for 30% down payment. So I just made this spread on the down payment, but negotiated for him to keep a loan in place for 7 years at 5% interest, and he was happy. And literally, when I changed the special financing, I put it on my site with the new terms, and I sent my email blast out to my buyers. I literally had people just running to this property. I mean, people were tripping over themselves, and I sold it in a matter of, by the time we got the contract and everything, within 3 weeks, and was able to flip it. So that is when it comes to actually wholesaling from because we always have to sell the properties, right? If we get a property on contract, we have to sell it. And I always tell people, think of your exit plan. But when it comes to seller financing, that type of exit plan is very desirable for the end buyer, and puts the property in a position where it could sell quickly.
Yes, and it's when you start giving the sellers the numbers, they're really happy, because it doesn't. To see the difference between $4,200 a year versus $65,000 a year, it's pretty. And as you said, and just because you mentioned it sort of an offhand way, just so everybody's clear on this call or on this podcast, when you sell it on seller financing, you pay the taxes on your sale as you collect the money. So
right.
So that means that you're basically just, your interest is against a bigger amount of money. And we didn't even talk about how typically when a seller takes back financing, they get a higher price too.
Yeah, they typically get a higher price, which is even better. So, okay.
Yeah, so it's win for everybody. So anyway.
All right, so let's get back to we've got our seller now that calls, and now we're talking. We're thinking about our exit plan. We're talking about, and now you find they're motivated, and you're asked the question that you asked is, how quick would you like to get this property closed if you could do it? And they say, okay, listen, we were thinking about selling and we were going to list it, but they say, hey, listen, I really want to get this thing. We really got to get this done by the end of the year, right, for tax reasons, whatever. And so now you got someone that's hot to trot on the property. How would you then, get the property under contract or actually negotiate the price? Because, when it comes to negotiating on a wholesale deal for a house, you look at ARV, which is very simple, after repair value is what we call it, unless you have a $100,000 property, the formula is 60% less repairs, or my fault, 70% less repairs, which, if you get it in the 60% range, you can turn around and flip it, make money. Now with commercial, it's a little bit different. How do you determine the price that you need to be at so you can turn around and flip it and make money? I guess that'd be question number one. And question number two is, once you determine that, how would you get the property under contract?
Okay, so first part, the big difference between a single-family residence versus commercial is that single-family residences are valued based on competitive or comparable listings, meaning other properties that have sold in the past couple of months. Commercial properties are valued on cash flow, because really the benefit to a commercial property is how much money does it throw off each month,
right,
net of its expenses. And there's a name for that, and that's called net operating income. And net operating income, and for everybody that's listening to this, you can write down letters NOI, net operating income. And that's something you're going to hear in commercial all the time.
Right.
And all that it stands for, it's the annual income minus the annual expenses. Except, here's the trick, and where you have to be clear, you don't include the mortgage in there.
So it does not include debt service.
Correct. And the reason you do that is that you can compare properties between one another, even though they may have different financing on them. Because assuming that a property is going to be sold for cash, the current buyer isn't very interested on whatever the current financing is because it's not relevant. But they do want to know how much money, meaning how much free cash flow is available to pay debt service and to pay owner's profit.
Okay.
So
Now,
how does net operating income is?
Now, how does cap rate fall into with NOI?
So cap rate is the mathematical relationship between NOI and the purchase price. If you take NOI and divide it into the purchase price, that gets you the cap rate.
Gotcha.
So just for example, if we had a property with $10,000 a year in net operating income and a $100,000 purchase price, it would have a cap rate of 10%.
10 cap.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yep, that's perfect.
There's $10,000 left over. And so just for example, if someone paid cash for the property, someone pays $100,000 in cash, and if they're going to get $10,000 a year in essentially profit, meaning money left over after expenses, they're getting a 10% return, right? That's simple.
Right. Now
you can scale that up. You can scale it up to, if you were getting $100,000 NOI and you paid $1 million for the property, your cap rate would be 10.
Okay, so let's say that you do have that $10,000 and that $10,000 your NOI, and then there's a mortgage on it that you have to pay, say, $6,000 a year. So there'd be $4,000 left over of free cash flow with the mortgage on that. That $4,000 is not calculated in that cap rate. That's what we're saying, correct?
Correct. Yeah, cap rate ignores financing.
Gotcha.
When you take the net left over after mortgage financing, that's when you're going to go into another figure called cash-on-cash return.
Gotcha.
And a cash-on-cash return says, all right, if I buy this building and I finance it in this way, I'm going to have a certain amount of cash left over. If I compare that to how much cash I have to put into the property to get it, meaning down payment plus repairs, then you can calculate what your return is. Like, let's say, for example, that you're buying a property and you have to put $100,000 in as a down payment, and let's say that includes repairs, just for simplicity's sake.
Right.
So you're going to put $100,000 in to get this property, and let's say that your cash flow after you pay the mortgage and after all your expenses is $15,000 a year.
Right.
Then your cash-on-cash return would be 15% because you're getting $15,000 a year and you've invested $100,000, so you're getting a 15% return.
Okay, so now let's take this back to actually negotiating with the seller. So what we first initially do, I would think, which would make sense, is to gather as much information from the seller when it comes to, and let's use a 20-unit apartment complex as our example through this process. So you have a buyer that's looking for anywhere from 10 to 50 units. You have a guy that calls. He has a 20-unit apartment complex. He's owned it since 1998, and let's say he owns it free and clear, to make it easy. So this guy calls and he says, okay, I'm thinking about selling. I want to downsize. I'm going to be retiring soon, and I don't want to have this unit, and I want to sell by the end of the year for tax purposes or whatever. So what we do is, what information would we gather from the seller to be able to determine NOI in this information, so we could calculate the correct price that we would need to be at to make the offer?
So what we want to get is a statement of income and expenses.
Okay.
We want to get, and here's the trick. Most sellers want to give you what's called a pro forma. Pro forma just means if everything were perfect, here's what the cash flow would be.
Right.
We want to get actual income and expenses, meaning what are they actually spending on taxes, insurance, heat, repairs, what's their actual vacancy rate historically over the past, say, 24 months. And we get all of those numbers together, and then we can calculate, once we have the actual numbers, we can calculate the net operating income, because remember, net operating income is going to be the revenue that comes in, so we know what rents were collected,
right,
minus the actual expenses, and that gets us the actual net operating income.
Right.
And once we have that, given a proposed purchase price, we can know what the cap rate would be. Because remember, we're going to take that net operating income, divide it into the purchase price, and that's going to give us the cap rate.
Okay. So let's say for an example, this guy's got 20 units, right? And he's out of the 20 units is currently right now 80% occupied.
Okay.
So there's basically 16 units that are 16 units that are currently rented, and let's say they're renting it to make it easy, for $500 a piece. So let me get my trusty calculator out. So we've got
$8,000 a month. $8,000 a month, or $96,000 a year in income.
So $8,000 a month, or $96,000 a year in income. And now let's say the expenses on this is let's call it 45% expenses, which would be high, wouldn't you think? Like 40.
Yeah, it would be, but let's just for purpose of just education.
Right. So we take the 96,000.
43,200 a year.
43,200. The mathematician, very good. So we got 43,200, and that would be our NOI. Is that right?
No, those are our expenses. So if we
my fault. Okay, so then we subtract the 96 from the 43,200 would be, what do you got?
52,800.
52,800. So that's our NOI.
You got it.
Gotcha. Now that comes over, and we don't know, what. And let's say, and do we determine a market cap rate? So, because I know back in like 2005, when the market was crazy, cap rates were ridiculously low, like 3 and 4%. But now the market's kind of shifted, where cap rates are now up in the 8 to 12% range. How would when we're determining price on this particular property, do we take in consideration like a market cap rate, or how do we do this for like retail value?
What we would do is figure out what the market cap rate is in your area. And what you would basically do with that is talk to local brokers. There are some surveys that are taken, especially local market. One of the places I get my information is from local apartment owners association. In virtually all major cities and metropolitan areas, there's an association of building owners which own multifamily apartment buildings.
Gotcha.
And they usually do a study every year on what the normal expenses are in their area plus the going cap rates.
Gotcha.
And that's one source for that information. Appraisers have that information. Real estate brokers to a degree, although real estate brokers are always a little suspect, because if they're trying to sell you a property, they may finagle
be a little bit ambitious on the, or actually, exactly. Okay, so let's say for this particular example, our 20 unit here, let's say our cap rate in our market area. Now, here in Phoenix, we're talking, to make it easy, let's make it 10%. Okay, so we talk to a broker, we call them and they say, yeah, the going rates for this particular age property, we're talking roughly about 10% cap rates for this particular area. So how would we then, we got 52,800 as our NOI, and we got a 10% as the average cap rate. How would we then figure out the
price?
Very
simple. Divide the NOI by the cap rate. So divide 52,800 times 10%, and you get 528,000.
So we have 528,000, and this would be considered the current fair market value. Is that right? Saying the current fair market value. It's not a pro forma. It's the current fair market value of the property in its condition. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay, so we got the current fair market value. Okay, now with the 528, right? And now remember, we have our buyer that's over here. He's looking for 10 to 50 units, right? How would we then determine what a wholesale number that we need to get this at to be able to flip it?
Well, it becomes like any other wholesale deal. I mean, the better deal you can negotiate, the better you'll do. And one of the secrets of the way that we do business is we already have our buyers, so we know what buyers are willing to pay. So let's just say, for example, say that your buyer said, if I can find nice buildings like B-class buildings, which for everybody in the call, B-class building just means like 20 years old or less typically, in a nice middle-class neighborhood that you'd be comfortable going into day or night. That's my translation of B-class. So let's say you're talking B-class building, and if they said, if I can get a 10% cap rate, I'm thrilled, I'm happy all day. So that means that buyer is really willing to pay $528,000 for that building. So essentially the way you build your wholesale fee is by negotiating it for less. So if we negotiate it, let's just be really simple. We negotiate it for $500,000, then your wholesale fee should be $28,000.
Gotcha. That's great. That's awesome, because now part of the information you're getting from your buyer is the cap rate they're looking to get. Because remember, they're just buying off cash flow, right? So if they say they want 10 to 50 units, they want a specific area and age, and then you targeted that, and you have a seller now, so you get the cap rate. So anything you negotiate below that particular cap rate on your buy side, which could be very easily done when you're negotiating with a buyer, with your seller, you could say, hey, listen, we need to be at a 6%, or actually, my fault, we need to be at a 12 or 13% cap rate, which would easily give you a 3 to 5% spread, on those numbers, right?
Each percentage is going to swing your number by $52,800. So if you negotiated an 11% cap rate, your wholesale fee would be $52,800.
And I think that would be a very easy negotiating point. I believe, in my perspective.
It's really easy, and it's one of the things I think that I like about the way we do business is that it's just very cut and dried. It's not like, well, maybe, if, guessing. It's like, these are the actual numbers in the building. These are, this is what my buyer's willing to pay, and you know that in your mind, and then you know exactly where, what you're negotiating.
Right.
And you know what your profit is going to be. And here's a real tip for people too. Sellers are going to try to give you pro forma numbers, and a pro forma number means not the actual performance of the building,
right? That's a huge
but what
tip.
It could do. So, for example, when you're saying, well, this has a 20% vacancy, maybe market vacancy in your area is 7%. And the difference between the 7% vacancy that is sort of the going market and the 20% vacancy of this building is someone's not paying attention to it. They're not doing a good job managing it. They're not aggressively advertising it. They're not fixing up the units. They're being sluggish about getting things ready to re-rent. And they would say to you, oh, well, you should pay more because you could get this vacancy to only 7% and then make money. The thing is today, and this is very important, everybody knows this, today buyers are buying on actual cash flow. They don't want to hear about what might happen tomorrow, what could happen next week, what could happen in 4 months. Buyers today are buying on actual cash flow, not on dreams of tomorrow. So it really is a big advantage because when you find a poorly managed building like something with 20% vacancy, then if you move that vacancy from 20% to 7%, the upswing in value of the building is huge.
Yeah, and that's something where a buyer can come in and they can see, because I know, from a buyer's perspective, they're looking at these properties, they want to see where they can add value. Can they add a laundry? Can they add, covered parking? Can they add, some sort of, other revenue generation? And if they see that there's a 20% and they can buy it on actual numbers and move it 13%, that'd be huge in the bottom line numbers of cash flow.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, the ratio is 10 to 1, meaning that if you increase income by $1 or decrease expenses by $1, either combination, then you increase the value of the building by $10 because that's what a 10% cap rate would represent. So let's say, for example, that you rent 2 extra units. So we had $500 a month rent per unit. So we have now $12,000 a year in additional revenue coming in. If we multiply that times 10, which would be the increase in value, the building just went up by $120,000 in value.
Wow.
So
see, that gets me excited because, that's exciting because now as a wholesaler, right, we have the actual numbers, but we can sell on potential. So if I was selling this, I'd be talking to a guy and say, listen, we'll get it to you for the $528,000, dollars, and maybe I'm in it for $470 or something like that. But I'm going to say, listen, there's a 20%. You can get that up to current market is 7%. You could get that up there, and you could do this to add value, add this value, this. And now if you can get it up to the performer numbers, well, look at it. You're going to have $300,000 of potential upside in this deal. And I said, listen, if you don't jump on this, I'll have 3 other people that will,
That's a big advantage of working with existing owners of commercial properties because you don't have to do a lot of convincing to get some of that. You know what I mean, Sean? You're just getting them.
They get it. They understand it, right?
They'll see it because they'll know that their buildings are at 7% vacancy. They're like, oh man, this is a grounder. It's a top fly. I can just catch this thing and I win.
Okay, so now we have this conversation. We understand how to determine value now, where we can make our wholesale, our profit, where we need to be. How do we get the sucker tied up?
Okay, there's three choices that I use. One choice is a binding letter of intent. and you'll hear those referred to as LOI, letter of intent.
Yep.
The second choice is to put it under contract, which is an agreement of sale. Obviously, everybody here is familiar with that. And the third is to put it under option. You can choose any of those three. Some of the differences are an option is completely secure, but often people want an option payment with that. I mean, they want you to put up some money for the option. So that usually makes them somewhat unattractive for this, because then you're putting your money at risk, and one of the ideas is not to do that.
Right.
A letter of intent is a really good choice, because with the letter of intent, especially a binding letter of intent, you're not typically putting up a deposit with that. And a letter of intent is mine is a 2-page document that essentially says that the parties commit to a price, and they commit to exchange the information, like the actual performance figures in the building, so you can calculate the price, and to negotiate to an agreement of sale within a defined time, usually 30 days. And I think that's especially appropriate for wholesaling, because that's when we're going to, we enter this letter of intent, and then as soon as we have that signed letter of intent, we have control over the property. And then we can shop it around to our buyers, and we can say, look, I've got this building. If you're interested in it, we can negotiate using the agreement of sale that you would be interested in.
So the letter of intent gives you equitable controlling interest in the property.
Yes, but it's got to be a binding letter of intent. Some aren't binding.
Gotcha.
The binding letter of intent commits the parties to negotiating in good faith to reach an agreement of sale. They're non-binding letters of intent that don't give you that. So.
Right. And guys, I mean, this is why I love Bob so much, and why he has been so highly recommended, because he has the attorney side of it, meaning he knows this legal side of the business, where, see, for me, I wouldn't know the difference between, binding and just a regular LOI, right? But now you put the binding into it, it gives you that equitable interest in there, to where then you can turn around and market the property and have controlling interest. Now, is this a recordable document?
You can make it recordable, and you just do that you'd put a paragraph in the letter of intent that said this may be recorded by the parties, and then you would have to have it notarized, and you'd have to attach a legal description. The notary is necessary whenever you're recording a document. It has to be notarized. The seller's signature has to be notarized.
Okay,
so
perfect.
Just keep that in mind. You can record an option. You can record a memorandum of option. You can record an agreement of sale.
Or even memorandum of LOI. I wonder if can you write that?
You could record it. You could definitely record it. It would tie up title. I haven't seen those commonly recorded, but certainly you could. And that would totally tie it up. The other thing that I do, and this is another tip for everybody, when I'm wholesaling, I have my prospective buyers signing a non-compete, non-disclosure agreement. So they're signing a paper saying that they won't give out the information about the deal to anybody else, that they won't try to circumvent me or go around me, and that they'll go through me.
So you have your buyers sign this before you show them the property?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so now you negotiate, you get the property under contract. Now you have the ability, and I like the LOI. I think that's awesome. And when it comes to terms, when you're actually negotiating with a seller in terms, I think you said real quick that the typical terms are a 30-day due diligence with a 30-day close, or is it a 60-day due diligence with 60-day close, or what?
I would say in today's market, you're probably going to have 60 days of due diligence and probably a 60 to 90-day close, probably 90 days, but you'll most likely close sooner. And the reasons for that, when you're doing commercial versus residential, you have to do more due diligence. And in a wholesaling model, you're not going to be the one doing the due diligence, but just so you know what's actually going on out there.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to verify the zoning. You've got to verify that this thing is actually zoned for, the 50 units that are there, that it wasn't a 45 unit that somehow they built 5 extra units in the basement and now they're selling it as a 50 unit.
Right.
Because at some point, the county inspectors can come out, and maybe that happens when the property is transferred, and all of a sudden they find 5 illegal units down there, and all of a sudden you're back to a 45-unit building again.
Right, which makes a big difference in price.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Remember that 10-to-1 ratio. So we're always going to check zoning. We're going to check that permits were appropriately pulled. We're going to check that there's adequate parking, for example.
Yes.
One of the problems with converting, changing the number of units is there may not then be enough parking spots. We're also going to do an environmental study, and you'll hear these called a Phase 1 study or Phase 2 study. phase one study means that someone goes and checks the public records and checks overhead photographs that have been taken of the property to see that there's no indication of toxic waste. Yeah. That toxic waste could be something like asbestos in the pipes. It could be an underground oil storage tank that's leaked or potentially could be leaking.
USTs.
Could be old, yes, USTs, underground storage tanks. Underground storage tank may have to be removed as part of selling the property. Like in New Jersey, they're always removed. Doesn't happen in other states, but in New Jersey, they're always removed. So you have to account for that expense. So you have to do more checking with a commercial property than you do with a residential, and that checking takes time. So this isn't like for residential. 5 to 10 day inspection period is adequate for most, but not a commercial. Commercial is not adequate, and also commercial loans. If your buyer may be getting a commercial mortgage, and if so, they can take a little longer to close.
Right.
The seller may require a survey, for example, and the survey is going to take a couple of weeks to get completed and evaluated, and it may turn up problems. I have a quick story. So I'm doing a settlement on a refinance for a mall.
Okay.
And this is when I was newer to the big law firm. And so we get a survey, and I'm looking at the survey like it may as well have been written in Chinese. I'm looking at like, what do all these little symbols mean? It has a little decode list. And so I'm asking the partner, I'm like, what am I supposed to be looking for here? He says, well, look for problems. I'm like,
well,
okay.
What's the problem?
Yeah, thanks for the help there, buddy. So I start looking, and I had another associate help me out, and we see this line going under the mall. I'm like, I wonder what that is. And this line, it turns out, is a gas line, meaning a cross-country transmission line of natural gas.
Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, so we've got a gas line running down the middle of the mall, which doesn't sound like a great idea to me. I'm like, this seems a little odd. So I check further, and I find out that there's an easement for the gas line. The easement is permission for the gas company to do things related to that line. Number one thing being to dig up their line to service it, meaning to replace it or repair it. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're
going to dig up the middle of the mall to replace and service their gas line.
Exactly. I mean, they have the legal right to do it.
Wow.
Aside from the mall blowing up because there might be a leak. But
right.
On top of that, so I'm like, holy cow. Is this real? Like, can this really be what it is? And sure enough, that's what it was. So we had all of a sudden a huge problem because, obviously if they bring in backhoes to dig up the mall's going to shut down. And it gives the lender who's lending like, I don't know, it was like $60 million to the mall, a problem.
A big problem.
And solvable. We did solve the problem with title insurance, believe it or not. We actually got a title insurance company to insure it. But these are the things that can come up with commercial that would never come up in residential. Never, ever. But in commercial, all kinds of crazy things come up. And, you just need to, that's why the due diligence period is longer. And it's not, and here's the great news for everybody who I just scared. Yeah. The great news is that since we're wholesaling the deals, what's going to happen is the buyer does that due diligence. You're not doing it.
But you have to negotiate. Yeah, but you have to negotiate the correct amount of time. Obviously, I would think the longer the better. So if in your LOI you can negotiate 60 days, but then on the sell side, when you're selling the property, you give them 45 days, then obviously you'll have a time cushion there.
Yes, and the other great thing about having this extended due diligence period is it gives you time to wholesale the deal.
Yeah.
Because we really want to, we want to get the property, we want to be able to shop the property around to our wholesale buyers while we're either in the LOI period waiting to actually write up and agree to the agreement of sale, or we want to have the time when due diligence is just starting and there's still plenty of time. So if we're bringing in our buyer within a week or two of a 60-day due diligence period, they'll have enough time. They'll have to hump it, but they'll have enough time to do their due diligence.
Right, especially if it's a good deal and they see it's a good deal, then they'll and they see that there's a 20% upside in the vacancies and stuff like that. They'll push the time frame. It's so people understand when you get this property, you're going to be putting out to the buyers. The buyers will do a level of due diligence depending on the size of the deal. On a 16 unit, it's a little bit smaller. I was actually in escrow to purchase a 329 unit complex. And for just under $15 million. And the amazing thing is we've spent roughly, I think it was just like anywhere from, I think it was like $10,000 just on due diligence, just to get, between getting the altar survey, we did a lease audit. So we brought an entire team in. We audited all the leases. We got copies of every lease, put it all in a spreadsheet to make sure that we had the right numbers and the current, income on the property. Then we had contractors go through every single one of the units to determine exactly what we had to replace. We had roofers out there looking at the roofs, and we went and walked each one. We went and walked, not all 329, but we walked a good, probably 50 of them to get a perspective on what the condition is of the property. But through our due diligence, we found that there was way more repair than we were expecting. It was like over $3 million of repair, and decided to cancel escrow on the deal. But going through that process, you kind of realize what that buyer has to go through to determine if it's a deal or no deal. So the upfront information you can negotiate and get from the buyer on the front side of it is very, very important, because if you can deliver that and deliver it quickly to the buyer, it makes the whole transaction. So that's part of a person that's wholesaling a property. Us as wholesalers, to be able to add value to the transaction, is to be able to gather this information, work with the seller, and getting their guys in there so they can complete the due diligence quickly and make the decision to close.
Exactly, and that's also why being a wholesaler is ideal, because you don't have all that complication,
and you don't have the cost.
To worry about figuring it all out.
Yeah,
and you don't have the expense either.
Right.
Someone else is going to absorb that. And I think it's good also when you're first starting out in commercial, stick to the smaller units, stick to things that are 50 units or less, and I think that at the beginning will serve you well, because you'll work your way up to the 300-unit buildings. But let's start with the smaller ones where you can make a lot of money. This isn't, we're not talking about $5,000 fees here. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in fees. And obviously, the better deal you negotiate, the better your fees. But I don't want anybody to be scared of this. There's nothing to be scared of. It's just we start with the more moderate sizes, and it sounds, Sean, like you were doing exactly what you needed to do. You're taking all the right steps. But you're playing in the big leagues at that point. And oftentimes when you have you do that level of due diligence and you find problems, that's when the renegotiation takes place.
Yeah.
Sometimes the sellers will renegotiate and some they won't. But that's part of the game of commercial real estate. And it's a great game, and as you learn the rules as you go along, and a great thing about wholesaling is your money is not at risk, which is just the best thing ever.
Because you did some marketing, you have a LOI tied up, and just in our example here, just like you said, if you negotiate 11% cap rate, well, boom, that's a $52,000 spread that you can make just on a 1-point negotiation, which could be, in this market, very easy to negotiate. So, all right, so now let's talk about so you have a buyer, and they say, and how do you facilitate from the, so now the buyer says, okay, I want it. And he says, okay, I want to use this particular contract, say a commercial contract in Maricopa County or whatever. How do you then turn and work with the seller to basically turn that LOI into a contract, so then now you can go to escrow?
Well, what you're going to do at that point is probably be working with this prospective buyer and the seller, and bring the buyer and his team in to negotiate the terms of the contract. So, for example, if the buyer says, look, here's my form of contract, here's what I need and what I want. Like, I want 45 days for due diligence, I want this, that, and everything. You would propose that as the agreement of sale with the seller and say, here's an agreement of sale we can use, how's this look? And then if the buyer, or the seller rather, says, well, great, except I want these things, you can be the intermediary if you want. You can go back to the buyer and say, well, look, they're willing to do it, except they want these things. Or you could, a lot of times at that point, buyers are going to have their attorneys just negotiating the agreements of sale very frequently, and you can have the attorney do the work. Again, not at your expense, it's at your buyer's expense, and that also means that the buyer is going to be putting down any deposit that's required.
Gotcha. So now the contract, is the contract between you and the seller? So is it from between me and the seller, and then I get a contract, like in the regular just residential, I would get a contract between the seller and I for the $15,000, and then I get another contract with the buyer and I, for $30,000, and then we take them both titled. They do a simultaneous close, and I get paid the difference. In this, it's a little bit different because you're going to have the actual buyer put up the deposit, and a deposit could be 5% or 3% or 10%, whatever the number's negotiated. But in this case, now you're kind of bringing them both together. The contract would be between the actual buyer and the seller at this point?
Yes, and you're going to have an agreement with your buyer to pay you a fee. Now, they may be paying your fee up front, or more likely they're paying your fee when they go to settlement. So you have an agreement with them to pay the fee. And typically these buildings are put into a single-purpose entity, meaning an LLC or a limited partnership. And that could be your limited partnership, which you could hold the stock in it until settlement. So there are lots of ways to secure it, but at its simplest form, you're going to have an agreement between you and your buyer to pay you a fee.
Now, do you see where the buyer comes down and they go, oh, well, listen, we've and try to squeeze you on the fee?
They can, but you can secure it so they really can't. Like, for example, you could own the entity that has that agreement of sale, and you could just say to them, look, if you don't want it, I have other buyers that are standing behind you, so I have the entity, so see ya.
Gotcha. So now it'd be between the entity, let's call it, Diamond LLC, and the seller, and now you own Diamond LLC, and then at close of escrow, then you would just sell your position or shares within the LLC to give the buyer controlling rights.
Exactly. Just transferring the shares in exchange for a check, basically.
Okay, that's good. Cool. Okay, so that's how you get paid. So that's the whole transaction from start to finish. That is awesome. Now, and Bob, I've taken a lot of your time here, and you've provided some phenomenal information. Do you have any particular stories of people that have actually taken this information and implemented it, or some of your personal stories of deals that you've flipped? Can you give us an example of a couple deals of the potential of this opportunity?
I'll give you just a really simple one, really very simple. A guy named Henry Serrano is one of the people that I've trained in this system, and we have a whole systematic way of doing things. So we train him in our way of doing business, and he just followed the directions, which is really nice. When you have a working system, it's a good way to start by just having someone just follow the directions at least the first time. So what he did was he found he did exactly what we said. He went down to the courthouse, identified buyers of commercial properties, and found one gentleman who was a local doctor who was just buying duplexes in a development full of duplexes.
Right.
And he noticed that the guy had bought a property 3 months prior and a property a few months before that. And so he contacted the gentleman, just sent him a letter saying, Dr. So-and-so, my name's Henry Serrano. I'm currently looking for investment properties. I noticed you're buying in the Carlton Woods complex, and I'm in my looking. Sometimes I find properties that are excess to my needs, and would you be interested in me wholesaling to you if I find ones that are ones that I don't want to invest in? And so, and he just invited the doctor to call him. So the doctor called him, and they had a chat. And Henry said, I noticed from the public records you've been buying a couple, and I'd love to go source some more for you. And so he said to the doctor, what is it that you need as far as pricing and condition? And asking the questions you had talked about earlier. How much of renovation are you willing to take on? What kind of pricing? Do you have cash or do you need a mortgage? Got all that information. And he then set out to go find the doctor some more properties. So he did a mailing to owners in that complex. He immediately got 2 people calling back saying, I really want out. And for the reasons you point out, your wholesale deal, the guy just had other things going on in his life, health issues or whatever, that just, sometimes the timing in people's life has nothing to do with the economy or what's going on. They just need to be out. And so Henry found 2 people. He negotiated 2 different deals. He wasn't able to negotiate the exact same deal with each seller, but negotiated twice. And he goes back to the doctor and says, look, here are the properties. Here's what you would pay based on your criteria, like cap rate.
Right.
And the doctor says, great, and gives Henry basically two checks. One check for $16,000 and the other for $11,000 as wholesale fees. And these weren't big properties. They were little duplexes. It's just a place to start for Henry. So it's a very simple, clear place to start. And 60 days, he had done two properties at $27,000 in the bank, and he was very excited. I talked to him a couple of weeks back, and he's like, I'm going full-time. I'm like, all right, let's just get a couple more buyers and a couple more deals under your belt, and then you can quit your job and go full-time. But let's make sure you have this down, and we get a couple buyers. And he'll move up to bigger properties. I have another one of my students. He actually ended up keeping this property. So he's sending out. We have a wholesale system for residential properties also, and we have a way of teaching that. But I also teach people who are learning that how these commercial deals are put together. So he starts sending out letters to the residential owners. And he gets a guy that has a trailer park. It was a coincidence. It just happened the gentleman had a trailer park as well as some single-family rentals. And the guy says, I really want to sell the trailer park. He's 60-some-odd years old. He's like, it's a little management intensive for me, and I'm ready to dial it back a notch. And so I'm ready to sell. And so this guy's name's Will now, and Will says, all right, I don't have any idea what I'm doing with these things, but I'm game. Let's explore this. So he goes and meets with the guy, and the guy explained to him that in mobile home parks, there really is no acquisition financing. There's really only seller financing, which can then be converted to bank financing about 6 months later.
Right.
And you do something called a seasoned refinance, but not getting into too many details to drag you through that. But he goes and he uses one of our techniques, which is that seasoned refinance. Bottom line, seller takes back financing for 6 months, and then Will's able to get conventional financing. Will ends up with this property with no money down, out of pocket, 6 months to sort of try out the property and make sure that it's all good and all is presented.
Or even actually add value to the property,
Yeah, just get it rented up. Because, an old tired owner is not going to be very motivated, especially someone who owns it free and clear, isn't very motivated to manage it tightly. It's just not. He's making a ton of money anyway. So the Will gets this property, ends up with $10,000 a month in cash flow.
Wow.
Now, he could have wholesaled that, for sure, especially with the seller financing and all. No problem, he could have wholesaled it. But he's collecting $10,000 a month and realizing it's not very hard. And he's like, I'm doing this. And he hired a manager and got the manager to manage it, and Will's take is about $10,000 a month every month.
Wow. One thing I do teach in my whole thing is first you get started and you get your first check. Get your first wholesale check. Then, you get to a position where you get 1 year's worth of income in the bank, and then you have the option to quit your job. You don't have to quit your job, but you can quit your job. And then the fourth basically phase after you do that is to then replace your current income with cash flow assets. So imagine this: if the guy's on a normal job's making $100,000 a year, $120,000 a year, and all of a sudden he gets in one building, one apartment complex that literally replaces his income. Guess what? He can take a month off and go to the beach, or take a month off and travel with his family, and not have to worry about having to generate money because he's got a property that's doing it for him.
Yes, you want to get away with trading time for money. And everybody has to do it when they start. But that's one of the differences between residential and commercial. Commercial, they're just bigger deals. You know how long it would take you to get, say it's a 50-unit apartment building. That's one building. The equivalent to get 50 houses would take years and a lot of effort to get 50 houses together.
Yep.
To get one 50-unit apartment building is one deal. To put it together in 4 or 5 months.
Right.
And it's something to work up to.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's awesome. That is completely awesome. Okay. Now, because of this information, what he has, what Bob has, also shared, and I have asked him to do a special webinar, which will go in detail specifically, and what kind of giving people an idea of what they will learn in this webinar.
We'll go in depth on cap rates, how to calculate them, what going cap rates are in the market. We'll go into what segments of commercial real estate are hot right now. And by segments, I mean office, warehouse, industrial, multifamily, land, mobile home, all the different types, self-storage, all the different types of income properties that are out there, and what's hot and what's not, and also what areas are hot. You know, there are about 25 areas in the country that are really hot right now.
Right.
And there are a bunch of other areas that are not so hot. So I want to talk about that and how to operate in different kinds of communities. And you can operate almost anywhere, but obviously it's easier where buyers are more anxious to buy, which that's the definition of hot. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the calculations. We'll talk about how to do the marketing in effective ways. I mean, obviously there's all marketing is good, but good marketing is better, meaning well done, well written, well performed marketing is going to get you better results. And I'll give you just a quick example of that. If you had a budget to send 500 letters, you're so much better off sending 5 letters to 100 people than you would be sending 1 letter to 500 people, because it takes, when you do what's called drip marketing, which is repetitive marketing, you get more people will respond. So you'd get more phone calls from mailing 5 letters to 100 people than you would mailing 1 letter to 500 people. And so things like that. We'll talk about how to do effective marketing, exactly how many you should do, where you should expect your responses to be, those kinds of things. Really refining a lot of what we talked about today, plus going into more detail, because I'll spend another hour or a little more than that just going into more detail.
Right. And the great thing, if you guys listening to this, and we're going to do this on Thursday. Now, some people might be listening to this in the past, but you can still go, and I'm going to give you a special URL, but we're going to do this on Thursday, the 17th of November, 2011. And if you're listening this, and it's way in the future, because that's one thing with podcasts is Phil, then you can still go to this URL, and you'll find more information about Bob and commercial wholesaling and what he does. But in this special webinar, one thing is great. It's free. He's going to do a free training that you can go through and you can listen to, and I've asked him to graciously do this for me and for you guys to learn more specifically on exactly his methods and how he teaches on exactly how to go, because I think this is incredibly important, because there is a shift in the marketplace right now. There are tons of buyers coming into the market, and to be able to add commercial properties, multifamily units to that portfolio, or even be in a position to understand it where you can purchase it and negotiate a deal to where you can keep it in your own portfolio, it can get you to that goal quicker, which is freedom, of course. So Thursday, where do they have to go? They got to go to flip2freedom.com/diamond. Flip 2 freedom.com/diamond. What that will do when you go to that particular link, it will take you to a registration page that you can register for this webinar on the 17th we're going to have with Bob, and he's going to explain all this information. And if it's after that time, go to that particular link, and it will take you to more information, to either his blog or his information on his commercial wholesale system that he has. So, Bob, you have been a great, phenomenal guest. Sorry to drill you with all that, but I really like the nitty gritties, type of information. So you've been phenomenal and literally holding nothing back. What is? Do you have anything you'd like to say last before we wrap this up?
First of all, thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I love doing these deals and showing other people how to do them. It makes me feel very hopeful and happy, because we sit there, we read the news or listen to it, and it's just depressing. And keep in mind that there is money out there to be made. There are people who are excited about doing deals. There are people who are trying to deploy money right now and can't find the deals. And there's a place for you at the table. And you just have to come up to this happy little table of money making instead of going over to the depressing buffet of old food left over from yesterday. So for me, this helps remind me, and hopefully remind everybody else, there's huge opportunity right now. Huge opportunity. It's a matter of just doing the right things at the right time. There are tons of people out there who have money. They want to find good deals. You see it in the paper. You see it in the Wall Street Journal talking about the number of buyers paying cash, which is, in some markets, more than 50% are paying cash.
Yep.
And you see, I'm sure see it in Phoenix. You
yeah, Phoenix is huge.
And so people are out there, and they need their retirement money to be working hard for them. They're doing self-directed IRAs, and they need places to put the money. And the stock market's not safe. The bond market has no returns, and banks have no returns. So real estate is a class of choice, especially income-producing real estate, because it's safe. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, if you have an apartment building that's 80% occupied, there's nowhere to go but up. Just add a few more, do a little better with the occupancy, and you're going to get cash flow month after month. It's never going to go 100% vacant. It may go 78% occupied instead of 80, but more likely it goes up. So you have a lot of really excited buyers out there, and you can serve as a deal scout, meaning go and you find the deals, and you'll get handsomely paid for it. And we talked about how that works. The math is not hard. You don't have to be scared of it. It's just a matter of learning and then doing. And when you learn and do, you'll make checks. And I hope that everybody who's listening to this podcast will come and join us on the webinar so we can teach you more. And let's go make some money out there. Let's forget about the Wall Street protesters for the moment. Let's forget about the drama in Washington. Let's just go make some money and make our lives better and make our families better and our own security more secure, our financial security. Because I think we owe that to ourselves, and I think it's a time when you have to stand up for yourself. You have to take action and do something to make your financial life good. And this is something you can do that's very achievable, very simple, very low risk. You don't need cash. You don't need credit. You just need to learn and put a little elbow grease in, and you'll be fine.
Yep, I think, and thank you for being so gracious with your time. And I know you're extremely busy doing deals yourself and working with people. So thank you very much for spending the time with us here. For people listening, go to flip2freedom.com/diamond. Flip2freedom.com/diamond. You can register for the webinar on the 17th. It's going to be a one-time event. So if you don't make it, then sorry, you're going to miss out. So make sure you get on there, get registered. We have a very limited space on how many people we can actually have on the call because we will be taking questions and stuff like that. So go there at flip2freedom.com/diamond. We will see you on the call. And Bob, thank you so much for your time. And we greatly appreciate it. And take care.
You're welcome, Sean. Thanks for having me.
And God bless. Take care.